Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of A Conversation About. Today, we are joined by Kimberly Wilson, entrepreneurship student from the University of Houston. Kimberly, I know you're a really busy person, so I'm really honored to have you on this kickoff of episode 2. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So today, we're going to be talking about our perspectives on mental health, and this was an interesting conversation to be had because, like, when I thought of mental health, it was always like someone having a battle within themselves, and then like I automatically jumped to depression. Like when I thought mental health, depression was the first thing to come to mind. And as Kim suggested, like there's so many other things that I just like did not come to mind for me, that are also mental health issues that need to be talked about.
Right. Yeah. So what I was kind of saying is that, yeah, everyone I think thinks of depression first because that's one that, can really affect people and their lives in particular. But I think there are other mental illnesses like bipolar or PTSD that maybe people don't think about as much as being, having a real effect on people's lives. But either of those things could ruin lives just as easily as depression. So I think that kind of talking about the whole spectrum can be pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, I just like before this that hadn't even like I knew PTSD was a form of a mental illness. I knew that bipolar disorders were a form of mental illness, but like the first thing that came to mind was depression, and it completely like shut off the rest of what I was thinking about. And it kind of just made those ideas a little more foreign, whereas like they're pretty common in our society. A lot of pressures that we have, and a lot of experiences and maybe trauma or just in general the way we approach life can like change these mental states and these attitudes we have. So it's definitely helpful to have conversations with friends because they totally open your world up to a different perspective. Like I didn't even think about that, but like back deep down I knew, it never came to mind.
Right. I think it's also important just to, I guess, normalize conversations about mental health with your friends, or try to like check up on your friends and like their mental health well-being or their I guess their kind of status. I feel like that's not done enough, or people are afraid to ask about someone's mental health.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's just so much that goes into that, but I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Like, I don't know. Do you have like regular conversations with friends about it, or do you think it should be a normal thing?
I do try to have these conversations with my friends, but I agree. I don't think they're enough. I don't think I have them often enough. So we do need to normalize them a little more. And I think like as we go down, I don't know if all of my friends then continue on to reach out to their friends or their friends also reach out to them. I'm very fortunate to have friends that do every once in a while reach out to me, or I feel like we have such a close connection and a safe space to talk that, I'll reach out to them. Hey, today was a hard day, work was hard, or, homework really kicked my butt or something, and it's those conversations that really make a difference for me on how my mental state is.
No, I think you're right. I'm really happy that a lot more people are having or like trying to check up on their friends, like you said. It's good to practice trying to open people up to, or basically saying like, hey, it's okay if, you're struggling a bit. At least that's how I try to start some conversations. So for instance, like friends that I have that are a bit closer, I'll try to check up on them during these times. And I'm like, hey, how are you doing? They'll say good. And then I'll reply and I'll be like, well, I saw on your Snapchat, I saw this. Are you really good? Because I'm kind of wondering. So I think it's good to kind of push a little bit if you do have concerns and just openly admit and say, hey, I've seen you do this, or I've seen you kind of pull back from the friend group, or you haven't really been, posting on social media as much. Like, hey, like what's kind of going on, to show that you really care. Because I think for mental health, in particular, like people who are struggling with it, they're kind of afraid to open up about it if it's really serious. They kind of think that it's a weakness, to show, hey, like I am having these problems, or maybe they're not sure if they're serious. I think a lot of people who go through depression as well, like they don't take themselves seriously. Like maybe they do legitimately have depression, and then they think, oh, well, maybe I'm just having a bad day, or maybe that's what people will tell me, and so they don't talk about it. And so I think that's why it's important to show others and say, hey, it's okay to say that you're not okay,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we normalize saying, "How was your day?" and the immediate response is good. And like personally, I feel like if I say anything else other than good, it opens the door for a conversation with a stranger that like I don't necessarily think I need to have, but I mean, sometimes maybe we do need to have them. I think about that a lot. Like when I have hard days and I'm at, I don't know, work or something, and my coworker is like, "Hey, how are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm good," but like sometimes there are subtle hints. You say, "Well, I'm hanging in there today," and it like most people brush that off too, like, "Oh, well, that's all we can do, just hang in there," right? And they just like brush it off. But like sometimes there are subtle hints, like you said, you like notice on someone's story, "Oh, you posted this," like maybe you're saying you're good or your friend is saying they're good, but there's like some kind of indication there that maybe not everything is as it seems. And I mean, that takes a lot to do on top of everything else you have to do when taking care of yourself. But like if you can notice those hints to your friends, I'm sure that makes a world of difference. Because then you can like actually have a conversation about that. Like, "Hey, I noticed you posted this on your story. Like, do you want to talk about it? Like, I want to be here for you." And I think that's a very important thing we need to cherish if we find ourselves in a with the opportunity to help out a friend.
Right. Yeah. I think it's also, I can go back to depression just because I have experience there. But when it comes to, I think, like depression in particular, um, that I think, or maybe even just having like a really rough patch, I don't know. But trying to get friends to like go out and be more social, I think really helps. To an extent, obviously, like if they really don't want to go out, like don't try to force them out. But at least like for me in particular, I went through like a depressive state in high school. And so for me, I thought that I wanted to be by myself. I felt most comfortable being by myself. And the thought of going outside and like doing things with friends like gave me a lot of anxiety. Like I just didn't want to do it. And I just secluded myself, and that made it so much worse, but I didn't even realize it. And so when I would have friends that would come over and be like, "No, we're going to the park, and you don't get to say in it," then I would have a lot of anxiety at first. However, after I got out, I just felt so much better, and it was crazy because like that short period of when it first starts, I think is anxiety inducing and you don't feel the best. But then after you kind of get over that hurdle, it really helps. And so I think with really good friends, it's okay to say, "Hey, I know you. I really want to get you out of the house. We're doing something." Maybe not for like complete strangers because you don't know if like they'll really hate you after you do that. But I think with good friends, it's a good practice to have to say, "No, we're going out. We're hanging out and taking you out," because you don't know how much it could really help them. It could really like change their whole week for you to take them out once. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts there. I don't know. I try to do that, but again, like you said, it's a matter of you have to balance your own mental health as well. Like it's hard to prioritize yourself over others occasionally, and sometimes that can get mixed up. So it's hard, but I think there's a balance to be had there.
Yeah, there's definitely a balance, and like it's baby steps, like baby steps to get over that hurdle. Maybe one day you just like went to the park with a friend. Maybe it was like next day you went shopping with a friend or something. Once everything opens back up, that'll be more common, right? Um, but like it's baby steps. Like maybe you go out with one friend, and then the next day or next week, next month, if it takes that long, whatever works for you. Then you go out with a group of friends, and it's like baby steps there. Um, because it's difficult sometimes. Like I had the opposite at a certain point in my life where I thought what I needed more was to be out more, to be with my friends more. What I really needed was like a time of self reflection, and a time to myself. Like I realized I was like not home. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was eating fast food too much, and like I had to ground myself back at home, and like just take a day off for myself, watch a movie or something by myself, and just like think, try to be creative, play some music or something. Um, so I, I don't think I've had the opposite where I'm like stuck at home and I just don't want to go out. But I had to find the happy medium of like, dude, you're going out too much. Like you need to actually take care of yourself. On top of that, I was spending a lot of money too. So that like I found out very quickly that did not work.
No, I get what you're saying. I've done the exact same thing. So I've had both. I think I've experienced both ends where, one time I didn't want to go out and that was hurting me. And then more recently, I've been too busy and where I haven't been taking care of myself. So I've experienced both ends, and I think that it is a bit easier for when you're really busy to be able to recognize that and kind of take a step back. Although it can be hard in the moment because you want to do so much, right? And like you have so many commitments. But I think that it's somewhat easier, I think, in that state to kind of be able to recognize that you need to prioritize yourself. Whereas like on the opposite end, it can be a bit more difficult, just because people sometimes I think struggle more on that end. But when you're at least like a decently healthy mindset, but you're just maybe overcommitting too much, it's like, okay, yes, I'm going to start saying no. I'm going to try to start saying no to certain things. And I'm really going to I'm sorry, say that again.
And that's really hard to do. Like saying no is really hard to do sometimes.
No, it definitely can, especially I think when it comes to like if you really care about something and that's what's sucking up your whole life, that is so hard to do. For me, it's like it's talking to friends, trying to take care of friends, and that's how I can get carried away very easily is trying to do too much for other people. And so that's when it becomes really hard for me to tell someone no. At least for me, I think it helps, giving the reason of saying, hey, I haven't been prioritizing myself very recently. So that's why I'm saying no this one time. But later, let's do this, that, hang out, whatever. I think if you give the reason of saying, hey, like I'm trying to take care of myself, people will really understand because if they know you or at least they care about you, they'll probably say, oh, hey, okay, I totally respect that. No problem. It's different if you're just ditching on them or saying, hey, no, never. So I think that's another balance to be had,
Yeah, that's a difficult balance to be had. Another difficult balance to be had. I think they're all difficult balances to be had. But yeah, like sometimes we overextend ourselves. Like I always want to do more. Like I always want to help another friend. Like I always want to stay at work more. Like I always want to get more things done. Always want to do the next thing. Like I always want to overcommit, and I end up doing it most of the time. And then to the point that when I'm not doing anything, I feel wrong. It's like I should be doing something, and I think sometimes that's a little unhealthy because like we need those days to rest and take care of ourselves. So I'm still kind of battling with that little balance. But I think you're right. Like giving an excuse, or not giving an excuse, but giving a reason. There we go. That's the word. Giving a reason. Giving a reason for why you're going to stay at home is perfectly fine. Like I've had days where I'm like, you know what, guys, I've been at work since 5 a.m. I haven't had a break. I think going to dinner at 9 is just not going to work out for me. Like I'm just going to be too worn out. Most of the time they understand, sometimes they convince me to go anyways. But I think a little part of me wanted to go, so it's okay. But it's trying to recognize when you're in those moments, like, hey, maybe I should take care of myself a little more.
Right. No, I definitely think that's important. I'm thinking back and now I'm remembering there are times when I've had friends. It hasn't been as many as I would like. I've had friends just text me, like we had plans and they just said, hey, I'm not feeling up for it, or hey, like I just wanna chill for the night, and I just remembered like when that happens, I have so much more respect for them for some reason. Like I see that and I'm like, oh my God, yes, I love that, take care of yourself. I enjoy that response kind of more, I guess, than, oh, hey, like, just making up some excuse that's obviously fake. Because I think I've had that happen where you have a friend text you and be like, oh, just with some lame excuse. But just to say, hey, I want to chill, I'm like, yes, go for it. And I love it so much more.
Yeah, there's definitely some appreciation there when you recognize, oh, this person is taking care of themselves. At the same time, like when I get that response, and like you said, it's like not as often as you would like to see because, people have these issues. People are tired sometimes. So it'd be nice to see that more often when they're taking care of themselves. But when I do see it, it's like, okay, take your time, do what you need to do. You need your you time. But if you want to talk, I'll be here, like don't be afraid to send me a text. Don't be afraid to call me. I'll pick up. I promise. If I don't pick up on the first ring, I'll call you right back. Like I want to be here for you. And I don't think we see that nearly enough. I mean, not to say that everyone should just like be very opening to everyone, and just like trying to be there for all your friends, because then you'll overextend yourself too. But I mean, another happy medium that you have to find.
Right. Yes, but yeah. I'm just thinking, especially when it comes to like, I think like for me, thinking back to like my depressive kind of state that I had for a while, I was afraid to open up to people. I think another reason was because I was afraid of that their response would just be like, "Oh, get over it," or "Oh, you're only having a bad day." Like people would minimize the extent of what you're feeling. And just in any relationship, I don't think that's a good thing. But that could be a whole other conversation. But I think that's a large fear that a lot of people have, is that their emotions and any feelings that they have are going to be minimized by their friends or their family without their friends or family even realizing it. Because I don't think people recognize like that can be detrimental to a relationship or really hurt someone whenever you go, oh, like just brush it off, or oh, just get over it. Like I think that's appropriate in some situations, but maybe not all. And it's important to, I think, call out your friends or your family whenever they do that, whenever they do try to minimize something. Be like, hey, I think you're trying to minimize it. I think it's important, because then that kind of lessens, or it teaches people, hey, this is what you're doing and it's not good. So it creates a much better conversation.
Yeah, I think it's, in a way, it's word choice too. Like maybe they don't always try to brush it off or like try to demean it in any way, but by saying, "Oh, it's okay, you'll get over it," or brush it off or something, maybe that was their way of encouragement. I haven't given that advice very often, so I don't know like where that comes from. But just a thought is like maybe they use the wrong words. But I mean, it's difficult sometimes because I totally get that. Like it's having a response always is very difficult.
Yeah. And like I do see where people are coming from, because I think I've had that response. Like when I reflect on my day, I'm like, oh crap, like that wasn't a good response. Or I think it's important to own up to maybe like, hey, that maybe I could have done better in that situation. Maybe I could have done better talking to that person. And just kind of owning up to when it's appropriate to say, hey, I feel like I could have done better. I think is another really important thing. Especially when it comes to communication between you and like your friends or family, that's so important. And I don't see it often enough. But that's again a whole other conversation, and I'd be getting off topic if I went down that rabbit hole. But no, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean that self-reflection, like, oh, hey, maybe I could have handled that conversation a little bit better. Like maybe I should have worded it this way, is a little healthy. Like it's not the healthiest to continue to go down that rabbit hole and then like, oh, I should have said this and this and this, and then you completely like create a scenario in your head that never really happened, because I do that a lot. But like I have reflected in some ways. Like I one of my friends a couple of days ago invited me to be in his wedding, and I was like, I'm honored, but I didn't reflect that in the way I responded to him. Like, oh yeah, dude, that'd be awesome. And like I asked more questions, but I wasn't satisfied with the response I gave him. And so when I saw him the next time, it was like, hey, dude, I kind of feel bad for the way I responded to your offer to me, like to be in your wedding. I would be honored to be in your wedding. Like this is what I felt from the beginning. I didn't display it properly, and I apologize if I came across as like brushing it off or rude. Like I am generally honored to be in your wedding, and I think that was like a point of growth for me, a good point of reflection to say, all right, if I'm feeling a certain way, I need to figure out how to express it so I can let people know that, hey, I'm totally okay with you. I'm totally on the same page with you.
Right. Yeah. But I'd like back to your point about like going down rabbit holes. I think that also can be very unhealthy, especially for people with like anxiety or social anxiety. They overthink things so much that is what's causing so many issues.
Hmm.
And that's why mental health is such a difficult subject, is because you don't always know like exactly what's going on. Because there's a different like response to each one, right? So like with depression, it could be like trying to get them to go out, but then it's like, oh, well, if it's anxiety, like you want to be able to healthily, in a healthy way, maintain that, or try to prevent the anxiety from rising, of course, and I'm just going into a rabbit hole of anxiety, but with anxiety in particular, I think that one's really interesting. Do what?
Which is fine. Yeah.
Yeah. But with anxiety in particular, it's difficult because it could be something that you need medication for. Maybe it's something that you just need to practice mindfulness for. There's so many different ways in which you can help a person, or that you should try to help someone. I think that's what makes the conversation really difficult, is that just there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to talking to someone about it.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of unknowns, and like when you start going down rabbit holes in your own mind, because I do it a lot. I like overthink things all the time. I always go down rabbit holes too of situations that never really even happened. And it's like, okay, that's fun sometimes to like think about, because like that's me being creative. But sometimes you go too far, so you have to know, all right, this was actually going on, and if other people are doing this or feeling this way, then maybe having a conversation with them about hey, what are you thinking about, what makes you happy, and things like that totally change their train of thought. Like they were thinking about 100 million other things, but now you ask them, hey, what makes you happy, and they're thinking about this one thing, and that like totally sprouts a productive conversation.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think with like anxiety and then social anxiety in particular, you can go down so many rabbit holes with that. And I think that it's interesting because I think I've dealt with anxiety a little bit in high school. So there was like my depressive state, and then I went through a bit of like anxiety, social anxiety, and there was a gap, and then I was like overcommitted, right? During my short like anxiety period, I would say that it's crazy because I would overthink things and think that people pretty much didn't want to talk to me. Like I would get in my own head and think that way. And so I didn't realize it, but yes, you're right. Like trying to just go to that person and say, hey, when I said this, how did you take it? I didn't realize that that's what should have been done. And then I think if someone had tried to tell me, hey, go talk to that person, I would probably get more anxiety thinking about that. And so I think that goes back to like having a friend that's willing to kind of force you into things. Because if I had a friend that would kind of push me into having a conversation, that could have helped me too. But yeah, like you said, it can be really tricky to deal with, and so it's really important to, I think, yeah, just like talk to people and ask really how they're feeling.
Something you said just right there kind of like stuck out to me. So you said like you had a part in your life where you were feeling depressed, and then you were feeling anxious, and then you were overcommitting. And like people could totally brush that off as, oh, just a kid going through phases and stuff. And it's like, no, sometimes this is like very real. And I think that's another way that it gets brushed off. Like, oh, she's just a teenager. Like that happens in teenagers. Like every teenager gets depressed. You need to give them time or something. It's like maybe having the conversation with them and recognizing that it might not just be a phase, it's actually something real, is also something very important to be considered.
Yeah, that I think is it just makes me mad when people try to brush it off like, oh, well, they're just a teenager, like they're just going through a phase, whatever. That frustrates me so much. Because even now being older, like anyone who's younger than me, I don't try to dismiss any feelings that they're having, because to them it's like that's very much real in their mind.
Yeah,
And
feeling it.
telling,
Yeah.
yeah, and then like just telling them, hey, get over it, like, oh, or it's gonna be over. Like that doesn't minimize what they're feeling right now in this moment. Like doesn't help anything other than like you get off the hook from trying to have a conversation with them. Like that, I don't see how that helps at all. And it's just really frustrating.
Yeah. I'm totally with you on that. Like it gets frustrating. Like you just never know what hundreds of things a person is thinking or what's going through their brain, and how they're feeling. Because like they feel these things, and if they continue to get their feelings brushed off, then they probably never get the proper attention, which like leads down to another road of detrimental things that could have been avoided. And I think sometimes that's where like as friends we have to take some kind of responsibility, and going back to like noticing some of these subtle hints. But again, it's a difficult thing to do. It's like the hints aren't always obvious. You look at this person, it's like, oh, Kim was always so happy. Like there was that one day she posted a sad snap, but other than that, like she's always happy. And then you brush it off like, she's probably doing fine or something. But in reality, what you should have done is, hey, I noticed this, one of these things is not like the other. So like, what happened? Are you feeling okay? Like, not necessarily making the biggest deal out of it, but showing that you're a little concerned and you want to be there for them.
Right. And then I think if you see one thing, and it doesn't happen again for a while, like don't think that that's suddenly just gone, because it's probably not. They're just not openly talking about it anymore. So for instance, like very recently, like I've had a friend who was dealing with stuff at home, and like everyone's home because of COVID. But he doesn't like focusing on it, because that also like it's harmful to his own mental health. So he doesn't like openly trying to talk about it, because he has a lot of friends who are really concerned, but he doesn't want to like talk 30 different times to 30 different people. And so what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll say, hey, like, if you haven't talked about it already, like, I'm just wanting to check up on like how you and your family are doing. So I think bringing it up again and just saying, hey, like, I want to check up on this thing is really good. Even if it does, I think, get better at some point, or if it's better for that moment, later, still try to remember to check up on it, because it can, whatever the situation is, it can always be changing. At least, and that's from my experience, at least.
And it redefines the relationship you have with that person. Like, going back and checking up on them, like, that shows the person that, like, at least there's someone that does care about what they're feeling, and sometimes we all have that feeling. It's like, oh, well, no one really understands, or like no one really cares. And that's like, that, I think that elevates the friendship to a completely different level of like being there for each other, even if you're not like always having the same or different conversations or the same conversation with this person. Like, knowing that you have someone there when you need to is also extremely important. But it's like a sense of relief too. Like, if I ever really need to talk about a bad day at work, I know I can talk to this person. If I'm ever not feeling okay, if I'm feeling sad, if I'm feeling, a whole world of emotions, I can go talk to this person or this person, and I know it's going to be okay after talking to them. And it might not be okay after talking to them, but venting really helps. Like, almost everyone like feels a little bit of satisfaction after letting their feelings out, after venting and ranting to someone. It's like, there was my rant. It might have not been productive, but I had to get it out of me. And getting out of you, speaking some things into existence and speaking some things out of existence is also a very important milestone you have to get to trying to overcome some of these mental battles you have.
No, right. I think it's also important to note, like, from a friend perspective, it's important to also know when it's appropriate to try and provide solutions and when it's appropriate to vent. Because this is a struggle that my boyfriend and I have had, where we're, we have to ask each other, like, or I'll start like complaining, just straight complaining, and then he'll stop me in the middle and he'll be like, are you just venting, or do you want solutions? And then I have to think about whether or not I want that distinction made, or maybe I don't want solutions, and that's perfectly okay. Like, we've had that conversation where we've said, if you don't want solutions, that's totally okay, because I have times where I don't want solutions either, and I just want to vent. And so I think knowing the difference between those two is really important, because if you just constantly come at them with solutions, it sometimes sounds like you're not actually listening. Even though you are, it can kind of come off that way, I guess.
That totally hits home for me. Like, yeah, even though you are listening, yeah, that totally hits home, because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was like, dude, you're a really good listener. And I'm like, oh, thank you. I want to be here for you. But you suck at giving advice. And I was like, all right, I can take that. I don't always make the best decisions myself, right? But I realized that by saying that, he was like seeking advice from me when I thought I should have just been a listener. And it's like picking up on those cues. And like, sometimes I don't pick up on them. I thought this person was venting, and, they were ranting, and I was happy to listen to it because I'm their friends. But this person actually wanted some kind of advice, wanted to know what I thought about it. And it's like, it's difficult to say, FYI, this is just a rant, and then go for it, because, I mean, sometimes you don't need to explain yourself. Sometimes you just want to talk. So picking up on those cues was a little difficult for me. And like, I totally get that right there. Like sometimes you have conversations where you're just ranting to somebody and both of you are ranting, but you're not looking for a solution. You just want to get it off your chest. And then sometimes you're like, hey, I like really need some help. Like I'm ranting and venting to you, but at the same time, like I want you to like pick pieces of this and think about what I should be doing. Like, not that I'm going to take everything you say word for word, like I'm going to do this, this, and this, just like you said it, but like to get my own brain jogging about what I should be doing. And picking up on those clues, sometimes those hints that are dropped in there are very important because that like gears the conversation towards a supportive conversation or a, hey, let's reflect. I'm going to give you advice, but you may not like every bit of it. Whereas you're just always being encouraging because you think the person's just ranting, and that like changes the dynamic of the conversation.
No, absolutely. I think that because you're right, like in use, I think that it can be really hard, especially like when you first realize, oh, hey, I haven't made that distinction. It's difficult to know when like a good flow is to ask that or like or talk about it. So I think there are a couple of ways because a lot of the times, like at least for me personally, like I'll be just complaining, and I won't know whether or not I want to just complain or I actually want solutions. I don't know until I've finished and I've kind of let it all out. And so just going back to my boyfriend and I, just because we've had this conversation very recently, like he will not, yeah, he'll interrupt me sometimes, right? Like if it's a casual thing, but if I'm really passionate about it and I'm just going at it, he'll usually wait until the end, right? And he'll like agree and he'll be listening and it'll be a good thing. And then he'll ask, he'll be like, hey, like, are you looking for any like advice? Are you looking for any kind of solution? And then I think that gives the other person an opportunity to say, oh, and then they can think about it and they can go, oh, well, no, like I think I was just trying to get it off my chest. And again, providing them the opportunity to say, like, try to normalize and say, hey, like, are you looking for solutions? Because it's okay if you're not. I'm also here for you to vent. Just kind of give that preface to, make it okay for them to say, no, I don't want your advice, because normally that's kind of rude, or people would see that as rude to say, I really don't want your advice. I was just here to rant. That can be seen as rude, but if you say, hey, that's okay, then they're like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I just wanted to rant. So kind of, I think asking that question even after they've had the whole rant session, like I think that's okay too. I think that's a really good way.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that word choice thing. You might be trying to say, you know what, I just want to rant today. Like, I don't want your advice, but it could come off as like, I don't want your advice. And that could be a little insulting. But I mean, from there on out, it is word choice. You hear this person get everything off their chest that they wanted to say. Might not be about you, but just anything they wanted to say to you. And then saying, hey, all right, well, I listened. I agree with you. I'm here for you. Would you like some advice, or did you just want to rant? Because I'm cool with both. And if you pick up the signs, like if you engage in this conversation, you pick up the signs from there and like find yourself in this conversation, then like the next steps, I mean, don't take my word for it. Don't take our word for it. Right. But I would imagine that the next steps are saying, who would you like some advice? What would you like? What kind of figure would you like me to be for you? Would you like me just to listen, or would you like me to, agree and then tell you where I disagree? And, what is this conversation in your head? What does this conversation mean to you?
Right. I think that's really important. So yeah, I don't know. I agree.
But if anybody listening is having any kind of, battles with themselves, any kind of mental issues, I will happily write down and list all the kind of resources out there to help you. There are numerous numbers, organizations, and services that are willing to help and are willing to listen to you when you feel like no one else is. And we are very busy people, and I can extend this offer, for myself. I will always be available to listen to someone, even if it's just to vent, even if it's just a rant. So if you feel like you just don't have anybody in the world to listen to you, you think no one will ever understand, then you can always come back and just shoot me a personal message, leave a comment somewhere, or any kind of social media. and I will always be happy to listen. I mean, it doesn't matter what time it is. If it's, 4 a.m. or something, you're like really having these negative thoughts, like, hey, I need to talk to someone. Of course, there are more qualified people that, of course, I'll listen to the description. But if you just want someone to connect to a friend, then I definitely extend that offer out to you.
I think I would try to also extend that, but like I don't know if I'll ever like when it comes to social media in particular, I don't see it immediately, so I would hate to offer that and be all like, "Hey, like if it's 4 a.m., I'll respond." Realistically, probably not immediately. However, if you send me a message, I will respond ideally within a 24-hour period. So, because I do think it's important, and sometimes it really helps to talk to someone that like you don't actually know and actually isn't involved in your personal life. So, I think that's important. So, yes, me as well, but I don't know if I will respond immediately.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes we do have to be realistic about how far we can stretch ourselves. 4 a.m., if I hear my phone go off, then yes, I will happily respond. But if I'm in deep sleep, then yeah, it might be a little difficult. But I'm the kind of person that checks my phone pretty regularly. I tend to not miss notifications. So I would definitely extend that offer out. But again, realistically, like sometimes we're at work and I can't check my phone. Um, but also don't think because we never got around to replying to you means we were just trying to ignore you. Because I think that also gets thrown around. It's like a million things are going on in everybody's life, and we get sidetracked so quickly, especially in even like conversations like this, we get sidetracked so quickly. Imagine in everyday life. So it's something that has to be balanced. Like everything we've talked about so far, it's like we have to find that balance. And a lot of it goes within searching with yourself and then bringing a close group of friends with you to talk about these things. Whether it be PTSD or anxiety or depression or any other kinds of mental health. I know we mainly stayed on the topic of depression and a little bit of anxiety. Um, as I've come to learn through these conversations, there is a plethora of other mental illnesses that need to be addressed. And like Kim said, we need to normalize these conversations and actually reach out and extend a helping hand to our friends whenever possible.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, I think that's just a really good reminder to reach out to your friends and try to normalize those conversations and just say, hey, it's perfectly okay to just reach out and say, hey, like I just want to do a mental health check. How are you doing? Like realistically. So I think that's really important.
Extremely important. Kim, I know you're a very, very busy person, so I really appreciate the time. I appreciate you wanting to sit down and talk about mental health. I know it's something we both kind of battled with in our own time, so it's like it's nice to have someone to talk to. A perfect example of like what we're talking about is between me and you, where we get to talk about these things because it's very healthy. So I really appreciate you making the time to come on the show, help me kick this thing off. And I will see you soon, hopefully, once this COVID stuff is over and we can have more conversations about this.
No, yeah, I absolutely hope so. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.